Hello and welcome to Positive Talk on the program. Today we are looking at HIV and plus 50 years. Here we are looking at the adults, both male and female, 50 years plus. You're HIV positive. What are the issues that you deal with? What are the challenges that you encounter on a day-to-day basis? To ably address that issue on the program, because definitely I can't deal with it on my own, I'm joined by Dr. Khan. Dr. Khan is a psychiatrist with Parerenyatwa Hospital, as well as Julian Chironda. Julian is 57 years old, qualifies for the plus 50, and Julian has an amazing story, knowingly living with HIV for the past 22 years. Doesn't know when she got infected, so just for 22 years she's been knowing, but definitely she's been living with HIV for more than 22 years. So they're going to be helping me to address the issue today on the program. Julian, Dr. Khan, welcome to Positive Talk.
Thank you.
Julian would want to first of all for you to share with us your HIV journey.
Thank you, Tariro. Actually, I got tested for HIV in 1994. It was after my husband was not very well. He had suffered from herpes. So he was the one to be tested first. So when he tested HIV positive, I just thought it was necessary for me to also get tested. As you know, having been together as husband and wife, I just thought it was necessary for me to also know my status. So in 1994, I went for an HIV test and I tested positive. From 1994, as we all know, there were no drugs for HIV. So we just encouraged each other. We used anything that people said would help. I mean, like golden products. There were golden products those days. There were any other, like African potato, anything that would be, that people would say was good for HIV, we went for that. So from 1994, that's how we survived. Actually, after my husband tested HIV positive, he recovered. Myself, I had no problem with my health. But as for him, he started struggling with his health. From 1994, then it was not that bad, but 1998, from February, he became very ill. And he passed on in October 1998. By then I had just turned 39, I think. And all my children were below, the youngest was 10, the other one was 13, the other one was 17. I had one 90, my firstborn was born 81 and 82. So it was like, there I was with 4 children below almost 20.
The same age,
yes. And also I did not know my fate. I did not know whether I was going to last longer or not, because those days is like you'd bury the husband this month, like we buried him in October. It was the norm that maybe before the end of 98, I was going to be buried too. So it was not easy for me as a young mother. I was quite young then. So I would look at my children and all I would think of, me dying, leaving them alone. We had a house, but you know, having a house without parents would not mean anything to me. So I would always look at my youngest, who was 10 then, and I would always cry. It's like I would say, what is going to happen to him? Because my firstborn had finished his Form 4, my secondborn was doing his Form 4. My thirdborn was doing grade 6, and the baby was doing grade 4. So it was not easy for me. Anyway, I survived along the way. So in 2000, I already knew about my status. I had known about my status for quite some time. So in 2000, because we had a mortgage, and since we were no longer employed, my husband, when he died, he was no longer employed, and I had been retrenched in 93. Along the way, I'd been doing cross-border, paying the mortgage, paying school fees, but now, 2000, things had become difficult. So I decided to go to diaspora. I went to the United States. I had to leave my children. It was a painful decision to make, but I had no option. As a result, when I got my first paycheck, I paid off the mortgage. Then I had to send my children to school. Then I was put on art while I was in the United States in 2003. At the same time, while I was there, it's like every day I would think of my children. I had no cash problems while I was there, but the fact that I had left my children, it was like they were now 100% orphans because I was not there to give them their mother's love. So it was a real struggle. For the 5 years I was there, even though I was on art, actually when I was put on art, I responded very well. I think after a year, my viral load was undetectable. But psychologically, I was struggling, knowing that I'm so far away from home, so far away from my children, and at the moment, they needed me most. I depended on friends who were here. I would send money, and they would pay school fees for my children. I had a friend who was like my financial advisor. She really stood by me as far as taking care of my children was concerned, paying their school fees, finding Form 1 place for my last born, finding my third born had to transfer from a day school to a boarding school because then I could afford. So my health improved, I would say drastically, while I was in the United States of America. But psychologically, I was torturing myself. It's like I would say, okay, maybe I will die here one day and I'll go back home in a coffin without seeing my children. And even though I would talk to my children over the phone, it seemed as if the more I talked to them over the phone, the more pain I felt.
Let me go to Dr. Khan. Just hearing the bit that Julian has shared with us, what are the psychological issues? It's just not her. It's many people living with HIV. Even others, maybe you're told you have got cancer, you've got hypertension, you've got diabetes. What are the psychological issues that you've already picked from her story?
Right, so thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and very inspirational story which we heard. So psychological issues, what I'm hearing is like started mainly, I think, when she was now, or she realized it when she was now in the United States. Being alone, not someone really there to support her. Psychological symptoms could be depression, could be anxiety where you're afraid, like also my friend mentioned, being fearful that I'm going to die here, I might not be able to see them ever again. The presence of psychological symptom, it depends on the illness as well, how you mentioned any chronic illness. But with HIV, it's associated the stigma which comes with HIV, that it's communicable. That's another problem associated with that. And I'm sure at that time that stigma was still quite significant. But what makes a difference is the presence of the support, your loved ones, your family and your friends. And when she went to United States of America, though now she was doing well for the children, she was financially much more stable, but now she was on the medication, which actually could give you hope that hopefully my viral load is undetectable, I can live much stronger. But that psychological support, that friends, that family support was not there. So she started to manifest those symptoms of depression, maybe anxiety, because of that lack of support there.
Dr. Khan, is there a difference really when we are looking at the time? Because when she talked about 1994, when they discovered her and her husband, she said we're using anything that was available that they thought would help. And for me, I'm seeing a sense of desperation there. And for a lot of people who are living with HIV, we have people who are going to faith-based organizations, with people going to traditional leaders, traditional healers, just seeking services anyway, because half the time, because of the stigma that you mentioned earlier on, those are the challenges that people do face. So after the break, I would want you to address that. We are going to continue with our program and would want Dr. Khan Julian to really clarify these issues for us. We want to know, for those who are above 50 years, they've got a number of issues that they need to deal with. Just being somebody who's older, and then you've got HIV on you. What are the issues? Join us. Welcome back as we continue with our program where we're looking at HIV and the over 50s. Dr. Khan, before we went for the break, I wanted you to clarify for us the issue of the desperation that comes in when somebody gets to know about their status. Psychologically, how can somebody be assisted so that at least they cope with those issues? And is there a difference for one to know her status when she was young, yes, she's 57, than for her maybe getting to know her status at 57? What are the psychological issues that individuals have to address?
Right. So I think very important question there. Obviously, when you are in your prime of life, or especially what we have noticed, teenagers really struggle with this diagnosis, and sometimes if they know that that's not what they acquired through their own ways, they have acquired from their parents, it becomes quite difficult, where again it becomes blame, anger, a lot of those issues in the teenage years. And when we are talking about teenage years, the concept of you want to be the same as any other teenager, and HIV is something which makes them look very different. So they don't want to accept that diagnosis. They don't want to take that medication because this is something which is making them different from the other age group. Going on to adulthood, now obviously you're becoming more mature, and you're also looking at how I would say at that time you mentioned that there was no drugs available
Yes.
at that time, but I would say I felt a sort of strength in them where they did not just give up and sat down and said that's our fate, we are going to die. They actually started exploring options. Okay, if someone said that sweet potato will help, they looked for that, right? If that time there was prayer or something, I feel that was the positive internal strength which led them to explore those ways. Then we also look at this time now when the drugs are more easily available. Secondly, stigma is not as bad. There is more acceptance in society and there is less stigma. So things are getting a bit better. But I think one important thing which we need to understand, no matter what age you are diagnosed, any such grief, everyone has to go through a particular process. And these are actually well-defined stages, which they say initially you almost go through a shock. My friend can tell me here what exactly was it, but the initial reaction is usually like a shock. Then you might become angry, like why me, why God, why me, why not anybody else, things like that. And then you almost go into the next stage, which is bargaining, where you say, if I would have done that, it wouldn't have happened, if I would have done this good or that, something might not have happened. Then you go into that depression kind of phase where you are now sad, it has happened and nothing can change. You are now with this status. And then finally you reach acceptance where you say, fine, I am HIV positive, but this is not the death sentence. I have options where there are medications available. There are now people which are more understanding. And that's way, once you reach that stage successfully through support of family, people around you, you own have that inner strength that's the stage when you start living positively and sit here and talk to her like my friend here.
But there is the issue of self-stigma. As much as we are saying treatment is now available, sadly, I've actually lost a friend just recently, and it's just a few days ago that we got to hear that she knew she was HIV positive, but was never willing to open up about it. We all didn't know. And sadly, when we have treatment available, but she couldn't deal with her status, and she lost her life. How do people accept? I would want to come to Julianne first of all to say how would one address that before I go to hear from the doc in terms of psychologically. How do you deal with self stigma, even to the level of failing to accept? How did you eventually accept to say this is who I am and I need to be positive about life?
Actually, what happened with me is that I was not really surprised when I tested HIV positive. Considering the type of husband that I had, it's like
now she's laughing before telling us.
It's like it's not something that surprised me because of the way he lived his life. So when I tested HIV positive, one way or another, it's like it was just revealed to me, because if I had remained HIV negative, then that would mean there was no HIV virus at all. So when I tested HIV positive, I was angry like anyone else. It's like when you are faithful and such a thing happens, you tend to get angry and you tend to ask questions. But at the same time, I met someone who was my friend for 3 years before we dated. So there was a time when we would sit down and talk about issues and resolve them in a friendly manner. So when this thing happened, I still went back to him and said, if I am, when he tested HIV positive, I said to him, I'm going, but if I test HIV positive, because he had already stopped fooling around. So I said to him, it's like, there's nothing I can do, because as far as I knew him, he had stopped. Maybe he had already known before I did, and he changed his way. But it
had already happened.
So I was bitter like any other woman. But at the same time, I had to tolerate him because he was no longer fooling around. So it was like the bitterness in me was not as if I had tested HIV positive prior to 94, when he was serious about his business. I don't know what I was going to do. So in this case, it wasn't as painful as it could have been prior to 1994.
That pain, that feeling of betrayal. How do people living with HIV, or those who just discover their status, how best can we deal with that?
Look, looking at that, again, one thing which comes to your mind, like, you know, how I described those stages of grief, right? That really depends on a person, how you are. Like, Julian has that strength, which were inner strength, also this ability to forgive and move on. And I would also say that positive outlook for life, to say, fine, whatever someone did at the moment, he's okay. So obviously, no, we cannot change someone's personality. What way we can help is, like, we can support them. People who are around them, the friends, the family, they can support them and show them that HIV is not the end. It might have been maybe 20 years ago, but not anymore. Give them that positive light. Show them people like Julian here to say, look how far she has gone being HIV positive. She was a single mother for almost 16, 18 years, right? She has done so well. So, you know, obviously they will take some time. It's a process. It takes time. You cannot accept someone to only positive talk, they will come out of that. like giving them time, giving them space, and showing the positive aspect of life, that this is not the end of life. There are people who are living positively with HIV. Just help them negotiate these stages of grief, and that's what we can offer them the most.
Yeah. Julian, coming to you, there is the issue of positive living and age. You know, with age, we know as we are growing old, we are actually approaching the end of our lives.
Yeah.
And I would want you, after the break, to share with us. We are saying you need to continue living positively, but you are also thinking, okay, I'm actually getting old. Yes, one day I'm going to die. What are the things that you think about? What are the issues that you worry about? Join us after the break as she's going to clarify those issues for us. We continue with our discussion today, where we're looking at HIV and the over 50s. Julian, living with HIV, we're talking about positive living, getting older, HIV in the equation, your challenges.
There are quite a number of challenges when you are living with HIV and you are older like myself. For instance, all the children are now grown up and they are gone.
You're home alone.
I'm left with one. It's like there are most of the time I'm a lonely person. And like when the nest was full, it's now an empty nest. And besides keeping myself going to the church, going to school, at home, when I'm at home, I'm lonely. And that's when, when you are lonely, you worry a lot. But I'm thankful to God that I'm not that worrying person. I've adjusted my programs. It's either I'm reading my Bible, I'm reading, as I told you, I'm studying for my diploma in the work of Baron Katie, or I'm visiting fellow Christians. I keep myself busy because I realize that if I try to be alone most of the time, I really get worried. For instance, I have 4 grandchildren. At times I occupy myself worrying whether I'll be there at their graduation, whether I'm going to be there at their wedding. Those thoughts, they come in. But then it's not for me to worry about that because I've got no control over that. But it happens as long as I'm alone. I do worry about those issues.
I'm seeing some coping mechanisms there, Dr. Khan. Your comment on what Julian has shared.
Right. So first of all, what I would say, the choice of 50-year age group, I feel 50-year, we can't really call them old. This is really I think the prime of someone's life, right? You have achieved a lot. Not only that you have achieved a lot in your family, in your life, you have also reached a level of maturity, acceptance, and how you mentioned the very excellent coping strategies here. So in that, what you have noticed, that life is about changes. Like I read somewhere that life is about, how the heartbeat is up and down. Straight line means dead. So obviously ups and down changes will keep on happening. It's a matter of adapting, accepting first, Julian, and then adapting. So when Julian saw that now my nest is empty, it's just one little bird left and almost ready to fly away as well, she occupied herself. She said, what else can I do? How can I make my better use of my time? Helping other people, right? And where she feel that, okay, am I going to be there for the graduation of my grandchildren? She said, well, I cannot predict, I cannot tell, but rather I should not worry and waste time. So where again I would say Julian has got an excellent personality, coping strategies. Not all of us might have similar coping strategies and we might need help. But I think the basic thing is accept with whatever changes we are and do not be too reluctant to ask for help. Wherever you feel that, okay, I'm struggling with that, because it's a huge change. As we grow older, we will lose our friends and family. Might not have a job. We are getting older. We have got pains, aches and pains. We cannot be as mobile as before. It's just a matter of adjusting to that, seeking help, and never be reluctant to seek help.
Well, that's all we had for you this week. Quite a mouthful there. Issues that we haven't explored here on Positive Talk, and it is my sincere hope that most of us, we actually benefited from those issues. Julianne, Dr. Kani, it was such a pleasure to have you on the program. Viewers, until we meet again next week, goodbye.